Hey, a little orchid update. I noticed this morning that this orchid, which has been going strong since, I don't know, at least I want to say July. I love orchids because they last so long. But this crazy plant has actually started some new buds. Maybe you can't see, I have to kind of put my hand behind it, but there's a new bud here. And then there's a new bud here as well. So I guess the fertilizer I'm using is working very well. And it just makes me so happy. Yay! Welcome to another episode of Facepalm Moments of the Week. I am Kristi Winters, and I'm going to do a wrap-up of mostly American news, which mostly highlights some stupidity that's happening in the States, but then there's also a really tragic story that I want to address near the end, and as always, I'll try to lift up the ending and make things a bit more positive. So let's get going. They say that Virginia's for lovers, but this week it seems to be for conspiracy theorists. This Virginia lawmaker thinks that there are organizations that are well-funded and linked together that are trying to destroy American religious faith. Representative Randy Forbes outlined this conspiracy during a sermon last month at his Baptist church from his hometown. And he said that he didn't have enough time to offer any evidence of this massive conspiracy. Quote, "Let me just tell you one of the myths that's out there. It's easy for us to somehow think that all this just evolved because people on the internet, they're reading more and they're getting more intellectual, and somehow or other, it's like they've discovered the world isn't flat anymore, and therefore we don't believe in God and we don't believe in faith." He goes on to say, quote, "If I had the time, which I don't have, I could put up on the screen or on this screen or on both of them the proof that would show you this isn't some natural evolution, this is artificially driven. I can show you organization after organization after organization to a network that would frighten you because it would be vast that you couldn't get it on that screen of organizations that are funded and paid with a systematic approach to killing and destroying faith in America today." And then he urged them to open up their wallets. Scaring people out of their money. That's what Republicans, that's definitely out of their playbook, and it's certainly out of the fundamentalist Christian playbook. Republicans in Augusta County, Virginia, flouted the separation of church and state after releasing an ad suggesting that only their candidates would defend Christian heritage. The county party committee chair, Larry Roller, told the local paper, "God is a foundation of our nation. If you read the histories of our founding fathers, they say you should not run for office if you are not a Christian." And the only thing that contradicts him are historical facts, the writings of the founding fathers, and the Constitution itself. So, I'm sure he's right. In other non-Virginia related news, Richard Dawkins is apparently going after Ben Carson on evolution, which of course makes me happy because Ben Carson, for claiming to be such a smart person in terms of his ability to work with brain matter and do that kind of stuff, seems completely ignorant on everything else. And so having Dawkins call out his bullshit, I think is pretty entertaining. Apparently, Professor Dawkins appeared on Fareed Zakari's GPS and said, quote, "You've just told me that all the Republican candidates except one say they don't believe in evolution. I mean, that's a disgrace. But for a senior, a very eminent, distinguished doctor, as he is, to say that, it's even worse, because of course evolution is the bedrock of biology, and biology is the bedrock of medicine. This is a terrible indictment." Yeah, pretty much. Go Richard! Are you waiting for it? Okay. Breaking the law, Christians! This Christian homeless shelter in Pennsylvania is going to be losing its federal funding because they're bigots. They won't hire Muslim employees, and they won't sign an anti-discrimination contract. The guy who heads the foundation said, quote, "We have a statement of faith that Jesus is the center of everything we do. We want the opportunity to talk about it. You cannot have a Muslim within our organization. Our faith is central to what we do." Great, then fuck off and use your own money, and we're going to take the federal tax dollars and give them to people who don't want to use them to proselytize. And don't bitch. This is your choice. You can either provide a public service to the public and be a public organization that treats all members of the public equally, or you can be bigots, in which case, fuckity bye. Are you guys ready for some more Christian privilege? And get out your tiny, tiny little violins, because we're gonna play them now. According to Four Winds, a sports ministry that stands up for Christian athletes, atheists are trying to eliminate the free speech of Christian athletes and coaches. The president of Four Winds, Steve McConkey, said, quote, "The secular school system is a puppet of atheists, even though they claim to be neutral. Christian free speech is being attacked as most educators are trained at universities that have put God on the shelf and have accepted different forms of Marxism without God. However, many Christian teachers have not bought into the system." You know, you can always tell people who haven't gone to college by how they talk about what happens at universities. And this guy is full of shit. He might have gone to a Christian university, but he has no idea what happens in public universities. So, you know, I really found that whining to be quite entertaining. And they're wrong on the facts, they're wrong on the history, they're wrong in terms of what their rights are and everybody else's rights are. And how long do you have to really live in that bubble and deny reality before it starts to have an impact? Apparently, a very long time. Anything that doesn't give them the privileges above everybody else, special place higher up, more speech time, more recognition, more validation, they think they're being persecuted. Fucking grow up. Hey, so you know how my channel has got all this, had a lot of attention lately because of the issue of patriarchy, and apparently some people in the world think that patriarchy is not a real thing. Well, here are a few stories that are yet more evidence that, yep, patriarchy, it's in our lives right now. It's influencing how people think about the world right now, and we are enacting patriarchal, things over and over again in our societies that are keeping women oppressed, keeping men trapped in a certain norm of masculinity, and we have to rise above this, and we can't rise above it if we don't acknowledge it exists. This article covers a column on that website that I despise called biblicalgenderroles.com, and I've actually been meaning to do more critique of that, but there's so many videos and not enough time. In a column on biblical gender roles, which is a really horrible, awful website if you are a decent human being, a guy going by the name of Larry Solomon argued that men should not tolerate refusal when it comes to women having their wives having sex with them. According to the columnist, women who don't like having sex should fake it till they make it, but he notes that coercing wives into sex did not always result in enjoyable experiences for the husband. He writes, quote, "You also need to realize that whether your wife knows it or not, she needs to have sex too. If you don't have sex with your wife at regular intervals, even sometimes when she's not in the mood but consents anyway, you will open yourself up to temptation. Focus your eyes on her body, not her face. Focus on the visual pleasure you receive from looking at her body and physical pleasure you receive from being inside your wife." Anyone else find that on the wrong side of rapey? That this guy who claims to be a Christian living by what he says are biblical teaching is basically saying, force your wife to have sex basically badger her until she gives in, and then if it's not really enjoyable for you, then just don't focus on her as her humanity. Don't look at her eyes, don't see the impact of what your demand for sex is having on her. Instead, ignore the reaction that she's having, and just focus on her body as if she wasn't a human being. Is this what passes for Christianity in some people's eyes? We're definitely moving into rape territory here with this next story. In responding to comments from another article that had been written by a men's rights activist, this Christian author we've just talked to agreed that keeping women in a constant state of fear is appropriate to control her actions. It's an appropriate way to control her actions. The author of the article, Tomasi, said husbands should make their wives unintentionally uncomfortable in order to achieve the rough, hardcore makeup sex you never thought you'd have. Larry Solomon of Biblical Gender Roles wrote, "So should a wife, biblically speaking, have a little healthy fear or dread of her husband? Absolutely. In fact, he suggested that Christian husbands should use what he calls the there's the door method." And this is what he wrote, quote, "So when a woman acts out in rebellion toward her husband and tries to act as if she does not need her husband or that other men would treat her better, the Christian husband should tell his wife, There's the door. Will some women be foolish enough to walk out that door? Yes. But the moment a man allows his wife to put him in a position of fearing her rather than her fearing him, the relationship has just changed from the design God intended it to be. The patriarchy doesn't exist in America. We don't have a problem with patriarchal values in terms of men's roles and women's roles and women being submissive property that belongs to men for their sexual pleasure and procreation. That doesn't exist. And just to top it off, another example of the way that religion demeans women. An Arkansas pastor named Jeff Crawford argued over the weekend that a woman has no right over her own body because it's owned by God, duh. According to him, the Bible contradicts this idea that we have bodily autonomy. Quote, this idea you hear in the abortion debate, that it's a woman's right to choose and she has the right over her own body, no, that's not true. What that means is that your arms, your legs, and your heart, it all belongs to God. Yeah, but only for women. He forgot that bit. Only for women, right? Because we're the ones who have babies, so we're the ones who don't get control over our own bodies. That apparently, according to biblical gender roles, is the wife is supposed to submit whenever her husband has a stiffy, and then when she gets pregnant, she can't do anything about it. That's the ideal version of life that they would love to get women back to. Right, guys, so that sucked, but I have news that sucks more. A publisher of secular books has been hacked to death in the Bangladeshi capital, the police said, and in a separate attack, 2 other writers and a publisher were stabbed and shot at a publishing house. These attacks have been linked to Islamist violence and domestic Islamist extremists in Bangladesh. I have to say that, I don't really think about the fact that I have this amazing freedom of expression where I can say things critical of religion to the whole world. And I don't live at all in fear of my life. That is a privilege that I have, a Western privilege, that I can say things and not live in fear. And I don't know how to fix the situation in Bangladesh. I don't know what to do to change people's minds or to improve the conditions. So I feel like the only thing I can do is to honor these people by sharing them with you and having you be aware of what they're doing, and for us to admire their bravery and also to be reminded of how precious our freedom of speech really is. And finally, a little story to try to pick things up, and I called this Modernizing Views, or Giving Credit Where Credit is Due. It's a piece from the Washington Post written by sort of moderate Christians who are trying to write to their more conservative Christian counterparts to say, y'all need to stop being such dicks. That's not really, I think, the best way. That's probably not how they would put it, but that's how I'm going to put it. This article talks about, builds on an essay that had been started in Christianity Today on the power of our weakness, where the author and his co-author explore the altered landscape of modern American society. And he says that there are ways that Christian conservatives need to navigate away from the outdated notions of a Christian America, because that's really not where the country is going anymore. He writes, the cultural, legal, and theological arguments of this essay might be summarized as, snap out of it. There are valid concerns about what the Supreme Court ruling portends for institutions, religious institutions, but this set of legal challenges does not translate into social apocalypse. By many, though not nearly all indicators, American culture is getting better. Divorce rates and abortion rates have declined in recent decades. Rates of violent crime and homicide are down dramatically from historical highs. Many religious conservatives mistake alarming legal trends for across-the-board cultural decay. This new circumstance does, however, require a dose of realism. Reversing the Supreme Court's decision on marriage is not a realistic political goal. This means that religious conservatives must learn to operate in a same-sex marriage world. Again, I always try to highlight where I see people on the religious side of the fence doing their part to elevate the discussion and make it basically more like humanism. And so on that happier news, I'm gonna wrap it up by saying I've been Kristi, you've been awesome. Thanks for watching all the way to the end of the video, and we'll catch each other soon. Bye. White balance!